Okay, so what are we doing? We are talking to Homer Flynn from the legendary band The Residents.
Yep.
Yep, and they have a new album that just came out on Friday. And what's it called? Do you remember what it was called, Bodhi? It was called Metal, Meat, and Bone, right? And it's like a cover album of the songs from this guy. What's his name?
Dead Dog.
Yeah, Dead Dog. So what's the story about Dead Dog?
He's probably not a real person.
We're going to find out if he's a real person, but we did our little bit of homework on the Google, and we found that he seems to be connected with the residents. So
yes,
maybe he's one of the residents, maybe he's a real guy. There's some stuff on the web about him working with some guy that was affiliated with the residents. But anyhow, we're going to...
two theories. Theory number one, Dead Dog is a real person. He's just made from the residents. Theory number two, Dead Dog's one of the residents.
All right. Well, we're going to find out because Mr. Homer Flynn is ready to join us. Homer, can you hear us? Okay, it looks like you're connecting. Oh boy, this is really exciting. So yeah, Bodhi, this is his very first rock and roll interview. He's been a Residents fan for many, many years, and I think he's perfect for the job. He's been very excited, just as much as I have been. We've got our questions ready. Now we're just waiting for Homer to connect. Hopefully we can do this. If not, plan B is to jump on the phone. It looks like he's connected.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
All right, Homer. So you have me and you have partner here, Bodhi Sinclair. Thanks. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Yeah.
Why don't you begin, Bodhi?
Okay, Homer, tell us about how you would join the Residents or how the band meet.
Well, the band is not meeting right now. They are planning on a European tour. They actually were supposed to do an American tour in the spring, in April and May. And, you know, due to the plague, the tour got canceled. So they haven't had any rehearsals. I haven't met with them since March.
Oh.
Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. Why don't you give us a little background on what your affiliation is with the band?
Yeah. I am the president, bad word these days. I am the president of the Cryptic Corporation. The Cryptic Corporation is the business interface and public relations people for the residents. And I am also the primary visual person for the residents. So I've done most of their album covers and their promo photos, and worked on a lot of videos and art directed a lot of videos. So that's my role with the residents.
And you've been there since the beginning, more or less?
Well, more or less, yeah. The Cryptic Corporation was formed in 1976. The residents go back to formally they go back to 1972. And I knew them before that. I've had contact, but from a formal point of view, my association started in 1976.
Okay.
Long time ago.
That's awesome. All right.
Can you tell us about your new record, Metal, Meat, and Bone?
Well, Metal, Meat, and Bone. The residents have a friend, a guy who was with them at the very beginning, back in the early 70s. And at one point, they were very interested in doing an album around the idea of blues. And so one of them got into a conversation with this guy, and he said that he had worked with a blues artist back in Louisiana in the mid 70s, and said he had some demos from this artist. It's a guy named Alvin Snow, and his performing name was Dyin Dog. And this guy, Roland, thought this might be the good basis for a project for the residents. And the residents were kind of skeptical. Their point of view was, yeah, that sounds okay, but I mean, a bunch of demos from the 1970s. But eventually he gave the demos to them, and they loved them. They thought they were great. So the new album contains all of his original demos, and then it contains their versions of those same songs. So when you listen to the album, you hear all the same songs twice, once by the blues guy back in the 70s, and then more recently by the residents who just recorded their own versions.
That's cool. We really dig it, don't we? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the extra tracks that are on there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there were originally 10 demos, and they did their versions of all those. And then they were so inspired by Alvin and Dyin Dog, they decided to do 6 more songs that are inspired by Dyin Dog. So those are kind of extra bonus songs.
Mm-hmm. So is Dyin Dog a real person?
Well, I've never met him. I met Roland Sheehan. He's the guy who was involved with Alvin. And Roland says that Alvin was real. So that's about the best I can do. I'm certainly not going to say one way or another because I don't really know for sure.
That's so amazing. I love it. Thanks so much, Homer.
Yeah.
So tell us about working with Black Francis. How did you guys set that up, and why Black Francis of all people?
Well, to back up a little bit, the person who was the producer for the residents, who was the architect of their sound for most of their career, was a guy named Hardy Fox. And Hardy Fox was my partner in the Cryptic Corporation. But unfortunately, he died about 1.5 years ago. And so the residents needed a new producer. And it turned out that Eric Feldman, Eric, having played with Captain Beefheart when he was 20 years old, and he's also played with Pierre Ubu and the Pixies, a lot of people. And, Snakefinger, who was guitarist with the residents for a long time, Eric played with Snakefinger. But it turns out when we just basically discovered that Eric was a producer, and a phenomenal producer who has a lot of same values and sensibilities that overlapped with Hardy. So replacing Hardy as the producer was something that looked like it was going to be really difficult, but it actually worked out much more effortlessly than I would have expected. So Eric is a lot responsible for the sound. And the good thing about Eric is that Eric is a musician. He's a player. He really likes bringing other people in. And because he played with the Pixies, he actually has a pretty good relationship with Black Francis. So we were at a point of finishing the album, but the residents like to bring in guest vocalists a lot. And so I think maybe there was one song left to do, and it was Die, Die, Die. And the Pixies just happened to be on tour coming through San Francisco. So Eric and him, they connected, and Eric said, "Hey, you want to do a song on the new Residents album?" And he went, "Yeah, sure." So so it was really just luck that it worked out like that.
Oh, that's amazing. Our condolences with the passing of Hardy. We were upset about that. You know, sorry that you lost your friend.
Yeah.
Um,
Was Hardy a musician as well? Sorry, I can't really pronounce it that well.
Well, you know, I don't think Hardy would ever claim that he was a musician. He was certainly not a very highly trained musician, but he played some. I mean, I think he said that more out of respect for a lot of the people that the Residents have worked with that were much more accomplished musicians, and so he didn't like to put himself in that territory.
awesome. How about you, Homer? Are you a musician as well? Do you record at all with the band?
No, I'm not really a musician. I mean, if you know, I love music so much, and if push comes to shove, I will sit down and mash the keys, you know, and I can kind of sit down and work out a melody or something like that. But I'm really not a musician.
Okay. Are you originally from Texas? I think I hear maybe an accent.
Well, what you hear is really more East Texas, Northwest Louisiana. And I am from Shreveport. Shreveport is in the very northwest corner of Louisiana. Most people, say something about Shreveport and they go, "Oh, port, it must be on the Gulf." But it's actually a port because it's on the Red River. And yeah, I grew up in Shreveport, moved to San Francisco in 1969, and I've been here ever since. But whenever I talk to my mom, well, you know, I can talk more that way because when you talk to people on the phone, you kind of pick it up a little bit. But my accent is not nearly as strong as it was when I left.
I gotcha. I love it. It's got such character, man. So did you go to art school? Let's talk a little bit about your work with visual art. So you say you created the album covers. I mean, there's what, a bazillion of them. So how many of them did you create?
How many album covers did I create?
Yes.
Almost all of them.
Okay.
All of them, other than maybe just 2 or 3, something like that.
Oh
But I'm completely self-trained. You know, I went to college at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is in Ruston, Louisiana, and to get back to the Dyin Dog story for a minute, Roland Sheehan, you know, who had the relationship with Alvin Snow, Roland was from Duboc, Louisiana, which nobody ever heard of. Duboc is about 12 or 15 miles north of Ruston, where Louisiana Tech is. And our connection to Roland came from him having been in a band, and Hardy was actually the manager of that band. And that was back in mid to late 60s. You know, the band was called the Alliance. They mainly did Paul Revere and the Raiders covers, things like that. And but Louisiana Tech is where Hardy and I first met. We were roommates there originally in 1963. That will soon be 60 years.
I can't believe that, how time flies.
It just moves on along.
And so you said you did visuals as well. So you toured with the band, and does that mean that you were responsible for creating the productions of the shows?
Yeah, I'm kind of the art director on the shows, and you know, I've either done a lot of their costuming, or I've worked with costume people, but usually they're working, you know, under my designs. I've done a lot of the stage designs for them. Yeah, I mean, whatever the visual components of the residents are, I usually have a hand. I usually have a hand in it.
Do they come to you with ideas and then you produce it, or do you come
Yeah,
to? Okay.
yeah. They usually have ideas around the project, and then there's a lot of back and forth. And you know, the original eyeballs, you know, that was the result of a lot of back and forth between the residents and me. And ultimately, you know, their original idea was like silver globes, kind of like giant Christmas ornaments. And so I went down to LA and started meeting with professional costume people to say, hey, you know, I'm working with this band. They want these, like, you know, giant silver balls for heads for their costumes. And everybody went, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You know, you won't be able to, it'll fog up on the inside, and then you won't be able to hear, and you won't be able to see. And, you know, so I went back to them, and they went, okay, well, how about giant eyeballs? So I went back, and you know, to be honest, the giant eyeballs are almost as bad as the giant globes. I mean, they have a little porthole in the front, so you can see a little bit, and at least you can breathe. Hearing is limited, but you know, it was certainly a good costume. It was very memorable. People like it.
Did they perform wearing the eyeballs?
A minimum amount. Okay. I'll put it that way. They mostly performed on the 13th anniversary tour, and but even then, it was just a little bit here and there. And you know, they would bring them back more as a kind of a symbol than anything else. And I mean, it really has become their trademark. But you know, to be honest, you can't perform in one of those things. When they did their Wormwood tour, they had brand new ones built, and those were made out of a kind of mesh, so that when you would see them from the stage, they looked fairly solid. But if you put one on, well, it was actually all mesh, so you could see quite well and breathe, and but at the same time, they were not quite as well designed as the original ones, and they were kind of top heavy, and people complained about them when they had to wear them for, like, you know, an hour or 2 hours. And you know, it's a great visual idea. They're not very practical.
No, they're brilliant. I mean, that iconic image where they're standing by the Bay Bridge is just, I mean, that was burned in my brain when I was a little kid. I mean, to talk to you now is just really just amazing, and you know, to share it with my son is fantastic. I caught the band in '97 in San Francisco, and they were not wearing the eyeballs. So my question is, do you create new costumes for every tour, basically, or do you recycle costumes?
For the most part, it's new costumes for each tour. There have been times when things have been recycled, but usually that's not for a whole tour. That's usually because, you know, somebody offers something, you know, and so okay, well, it's too good of an offer to pass up. We have to put something together, and so you know, they would go back through the archives and Foot Lockers and whatever, and pull out stuff and do it. But usually it's new costumes for each tour.
Awesome.
Okay, so what was your favorite tour of all of your music history, or in your
What was my favorite tour?
yeah?
I probably have two favorites. One was the QB tour, which was 1989 and 90. That was QB, the history of American music in 3 easy pieces. And that was where the second half of that show, they had like an Elvis imitator. And so the Elvis imitator performed with 2 ventriloquist dummies. And the dummies were supposed to be his Elvis. And that's one of my favorites. The other one probably was a show called Demons Dance Alone. And that was, 2002, 3, 4, somewhere, but around the mid 2000s. And the thing that I really enjoyed, I mean, I love the music from that, but I like all the music. But what was particularly remarkable about that show, they made the decision, or the decision was made a lot through economics. You know, touring can be expensive. And so the decision was made not to carry a lighting person on that tour, but to use somebody on stage with handheld lights. And so there would be a minimum amount of stage lighting, and then this person would go around lighting different people depending on, you know, who was performing in that moment. And the idea really was to get a dancer, because dancers would move better on stage. And ultimately, we got lucky in that there was a guy who was an incredibly accomplished dancer, who was kind of on the point of retiring. His name was Paul Denny. And this was kind of like Paul's last hurrah in a way. And so one of the focal points of the Demons Dance Alone tour is a demon. And the demon is the one with the lights. And he so much embraced that role that he took it to a level far beyond anybody's expectation. And really brought a brand new element to the show and to the performances that nobody expected. And it's just, you know, sometimes you get lucky. It's just great when things like that happen.
Yeah, when you said that, it just got me thinking. I had to tell Bodhi, just give me a second. I have a couple of follow-up questions, because that's amazing. Do you find, does that happen? How often does that happen when you have that synchronicity, that, or someone who just, you know, they just they come to a whole new level of performance that you didn't expect? I mean, tell me how often that happens.
I'll put it that. Vocal. You know, once again, it's like, you know, sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah, I love it. That's amazing. Bodhi's got a question for you.
What was your favorite cover album?
Or cover.
Sorry. Cover of an album
that you've made so far?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's kind of hard to say. Maybe Eskimo. That's certainly one that you know, the music and all is so abstract. It was very challenging to come up with something that felt like it captured that, and ultimately I felt like that worked out really well.
Yeah, you know, Eskimo is one of my all-time favorites. Did they really play indigenous instruments on that record? Can you tell me a little bit more about that one?
Well, I mean, you know, let's put it this way: the residents have great imaginations.
Yeah, I'm sorry I keep asking you questions like that. Yeah, yeah, that's all time one of my favorite records. What gave them the idea to remix it and turn it into a disco record?
Well, you know, they always or quite often would like to go back when they finished a project and revisit it from a different point of view. And a lot of their singles were things that should have been on an album, but then they got an inspiration after the album was done. And, you know, Satisfaction really should have been on Third Reich and Roll, you know. It's a Man's World should have been on George and James. You know, the whole idea of kind of taking their own stuff and, you know, turning it upside down is an idea that delights them. And that's kind of what they did with Disco. It's like, well, hey, this thing, we're not going to make this thing precious. Let's turn it into a disco song, you know.
Love it. Has the band been able to like support themselves completely by residents' music and performances?
They have since 1976. That's when the Cryptic Corporation got involved. I mean, you know, it's an amazing thing, that's for sure.
Okay, so are you saying that the Cryptic Corporation really has a big part in their popularity and longevity? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, the Cryptic Corporation has really done, I think, a great job at promoting and marketing the residents. Yeah. I mean, you know, honestly, they couldn't care less about that kind of stuff. But the whole idea of taking this, like, I mean, you know, the typical way that you promote and market a band is with personality, with celebrity. You try to make as big a celebrity out of your rock singers and your guitar players and whoever as you can. And the residents were never interested in that. So the Cryptic was the one who really came up with marketing based on a kind of a anti-marketing scheme. So yeah, I think the Cryptic has been very involved in you know, helping to create sustainability in something that most people would feel like should have died off decades ago.
What's so amazing is that, I mean, let's talk about the anonymity idea. And I mean, I'm just amazed that they've been able to keep their anonymity for so long. I mean, but let's begin, like, what was the genesis? Why perform, you know, anonymously? What started that? Well,
there were a couple of reasons. One was that the residents, you know, they would follow people, you know, reading Rolling Stone and, you know, whatever. And ultimately the whole idea of being a celebrity, being a rock star was kind of like, oh no. I mean, who wants people running around, you know, paparazzi chasing you around all the time? And, you know, they really wanted no part of that. So by creating this anonymous image, they were able to create separation between their public lives, their public persona, and their and their private lives behind that. But the other thing too was it was a decision around the idea of ego. And once again, as they followed a lot of other people, they felt like, you know, the idea of a group is a really interesting thing. And groups in many ways can accomplish so much more than individuals can. But then everybody within a group all of a sudden starts, hey, but I did this, and everybody wants their name to be mentioned as much as possible, and their picture as much as possible. And once again, they went, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. We will create one blanket identity, and then whatever credit or attention comes down will go to there, and then it will kind of organically filter its way down to wherever it belongs beneath that facade, that blanket identity.
I'm just amazed that they've been able to keep it up for so long. Have they ever, you know, thought about going a different direction? I mean, Kiss took the makeup off when records didn't sell. I mean, have they ever been tempted?
Well, not that I know of. I'll put it that way. I mean, you know, from their point of view, it's kind of like, what do we have to gain by that? I mean, it's like everybody finds out how boring we are, you know? I mean, they consider it, you know, it's kind of like a magician's trick. You know, when a good magician does a trick, there's a suspension of disbelief that turns into wonder. You know, it's like, wow, that is really great. As soon as you find out how he or she did it, you mean, that's it? There's nothing more than that. And that's the thing. It's like if you peel away the disguises and you just have, you know, four people standing around looking like dumbasses, it's like, well, how much fun is that?
I love it so much, Homer. I really appreciate this. You know, speaking of Kiss, I had a question. So I know that the band is going to like allow new musicians to come in and wear the makeup so the music just never dies. Is that something that the residents have ever thought about doing?
Well, that question has come up any number of times. And, you know, the residents are completely open to that idea. But the reality is that, you know, the person or persons have to come along that make it obvious that they're the ones that can take this forward, you know, and as of yet, you know, those people haven't come along yet. Whether that will happen or not, you know, I don't know.
I gotcha. So,
but everybody's open to the idea. But, you know, somebody has to come in and grab the reins and say, all right, okay, I'm riding this horse.
I'm telling Bodhi, you hear that, right? Bodhi just celebrated his 9th birthday, by the way. If you noticed that. So, you know,
happy birthday. Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the things that, you know, the residents, their music is bizarre and it's kind of hard to approach, you know, for some people. So how do you go about introducing the residents to someone who's never heard of them before?
Well, for the most part, I mean, depends a lot on how serious I think they are. I mean, the easy answer to that is to say, okay, listen to Duck Stab. Duck Stab seems to be the album that has the most kind of like obvious appeal. But then if they seem more genuinely interested, you know, one of the fortunate things that happened, you know, Hardy actually retired 2 years before he died. Okay. And so there was a very difficult transition that the Cryptic Corporation and the residents to a great extent had to go through. in the wake of his departure. But one of the fortunate things that came out of that was there were, Hardy and I each owned 50% of the Cryptic Corporation. And, he made an announcement to me that he wanted to retire. And so I had no desire to retire. So I had to come up with some way to enable his retirement and my ongoing career. So I wound up finding two new partners. One is a company on the East Coast that is a music distributor that we've worked with for a long time. They're called MVD, Music Video Distributors. And then another one in London is called Cherry Red Records. Cherry Red has done a fantastic 4 CD set, a complete retrospect of the resident's career, except for the past 2 years, say. And so if somebody wanted to start, that's a fantastic place to start, if they're really wanting to dig into it.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the point of entry to get into the residence world? Like which album? And Duckstab is the one you say. That's great. That's great to hear. One thing, so the music and the art, that's all documented, in all the stuff that you've produced. But some of the brilliant ideas and the marketing and the advertising that is the Cryptic Corporation. How do we celebrate that? Are you going to package that in a way that it's such a great story? I mean, how do we consume that in itself?
Well, I mean, in some ways, the reality is that, marketing and promotion, it's not nearly as sexy as, rock and roll and, music and whatever. It's hard to marketing. There are, recently made contact with a guy who does books of graphics about rock groups, and he wants to do either, I think it's a 3-edition set on the Residents, and so that will include really a lot of the work that I've done. If you're going to put out a book, well, then, you want stuff that, particularly a picture book, well, you want stuff that's interesting. And so it will contain a lot of the work that I've done, and then also a lot of, paraphernalia, merchandising stuff, but anyway, that's something else that's kind of gotten sidelined through the COVID-19 health crisis. And I just recently filled up a hard drive full of visuals from my archive and sent it off to him. And he was supposed to have been here last month, and we were going to spend about 2 weeks going through all my stuff. But anyway, I think books are one way to do it, and another way would be museum shows.
Yeah, I know there's exhibit in the Smithsonian. There's a residence exhibit there, right? Or it's still there?
There's been stuff at the Museum of Modern Art.
That's what.
Smithsonian is yet to take much notice, and I don't know. Does the Smithsonian pay attention to people that are still alive? I'm not really sure. But residents have a great relationship with the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and just did a fantastic performance there just before the shutdown, which was great, because this was something that had been planned for like about 2 or 3 years, and if it had not happened then, everybody'd be sitting around waiting for it now and wondering if it would ever happen. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it coming up. I was thinking flying out there. Where is the refrigerator installation? Is that the Museum of Modern Art?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's okay. That's cool.
yeah.
So why does the band like tour so infrequently? What's the reason behind that?
Well, they tour like once every 2 years,
Okay.
and realistically, that's about as often as they can tour and get the kind of dates that they need. Um, you know, if you show up too often, then you know the media goes, well, we just wrote about them a year ago, or you know, and if the media is not writing about you, well, then the promoters feel like you know there's not going to be any audience, and so 2 years is about the right cycle.
Yeah, it seems like that when you do tour, it's not too many, too many cities or too many dates. There are these small little clusters, right?
Well, it's about 20. Usually, residence tour is usually between 20 and 25 dates, and that's just you know that takes a good month. Um, that's as much as anybody wants to do at one time.
Let me see here. Now we're getting to the part of the show where I like to just ask you what your not necessarily. Well, why don't you tell us what your favorite residence record is?
Um, well, I have different ones, but once again, I've always really to go back to Eskimo. I've always thought Eskimo is such a departure from everything else that and you know, and they worked on that for 4 years. So to to have pulled it together in the way that they did, you know, it was very satisfying. And you know, God in Three Persons is another one that I've always felt really good about. Um, and you know, honestly, I'm quite fond of Metal, Meat, and Bone. Um, I like Demons Dance Alone. You know, that's a handful of the ones that I like
That's
the
awesome.
best.
Those are right up there with my favorites. So the new album, I think what happens with a lot of bands, they just, I don't know, the sound changes or maybe the times change and things just don't match and things aren't relevant anymore. But this new album just, I love it. It just feels so classic and it's creative and I love the story behind it. Um,
Great, great.
Bo-
No, that's good. That's good to hear.
Great. Yeah, I mean, we're longtime fans, so it checks out with two of us. Bodhi had a quick question.
Yeah.
Yes. Who came up with the idea to make the Discomo album that was the Blue Edition?
Um, I'm not sure which one that is. That's different from the regular one, the blue one.
Yeah, like the blue record from Discomo.
Are you asking like who came up with the idea to have different color vinyl?
No, I'm trying to ask who came up with it.
Okay.
I know that there at one point there was I think it was kind of a Discomo remix that was several years later, and maybe that's what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
Oh,
And
sure, what I might be talking about. Listen.
So one other question, has there, they've been able to keep their anonymity for so long. Has there been, and I think, well, has there been anyone ever spotted them out in public or tried to out them?
well,
You still there, Homer? We may have lost you. Oh no.
It's a sense of betrayal. And so, like I say, they're really good about embracing people and drawing them in, and then they feel like at that point they're part of it. So why would they want to betray that trust?
Yeah, I love it. You know, it's just so, the internet makes it so easy to find people, and I think it's so special that they've been able to keep that mystery and that wonder. You know, I think that's what keeps a lot of folks interested. Um, so I just had one final question. I'm imagining you're probably a music fan, not just a fan of the Residents. So, you know, what are your top 5 favorite records so Bodhi and I can go and listen to them?
Well, you know, I used to be a huge Captain Beefheart fan. Beefheart's Trout Mask replica was certainly I haven't listened to it for a while, but it certainly was an all-time favorite. I have been a huge Charles Mingus fan. You know, his Black Saint and the Sinner Lady album is easily one of my top 5 jazz albums ever. I am a huge fan of Ennio Morricone, who sadly died a week ago. And, you know, with somebody like Morricone, you know, in reading one of his obituaries, he scored over 500 films. And that's stunning. It's impossible for me. How do you have that much time in your life? But there was if you're looking for Morricone, there's really some great compilations out there. And there used to be one, I don't know how easy it is to find these days, but it was called Films of Violence. And it was a great 2-record set from like the 80s or something like that. There's another group, relatively new to me, that's a Finnish group, and they are called something like Amalaman Vasarat, and it's 2 words, and the second word is the first word is impossible. The second word is Vasarat, Vasarat.
Okay.
So if you go on YouTube, for instance, and you do Vasarat, well, there'll be videos of them live in concert that will pop up. But you know, most of my listening these days is on Spotify, and honestly, I've been able to find. You know, I'm a long time LP collector or CD collector, but you know, digital is the way that things are going these days. It took me a while to make the transition, but I have found a lot of new artists that I like quite a bit on Spotify. They're interesting people doing stuff these days, but they don't get a lot of exposure.
I agree. Are you hanging on to the artifacts, like the records and the CDs for keepsakes, or are you cashing them in?
The records are long gone. I mean, the reality is that I guess back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, something like that, I got tired of moving those boxes of records around.
I know what you mean.
There were too many of them, and things had already kind of moved to CDs at that point, and the records really weren't being listened to. My only regret, we had a fantastic collection of Sun Ra records. And I don't know if you ever went to a Sun Ra concert, but you know, Sun Ra definitely one of my heroes. And Sun Ra album at that time, really live performance was much more Sun Ra's medium than recording. And a Sun Ra performance was a transformative event. But it would sound, a lot of his records would sound like to the motels. You went away. You're back.
Yeah, we're back. Sorry about that.
Yeah. But anyway, Sun Ra, these obscure records, very small numbers, would come out with black and white, simple printed covers, and then anyway, we had quite the collection of those.
That's amazing. Well, I guess my final question is, we can expect a continuation of more Residence records to come in the future?
Yeah, and there's no thought of stopping at this point, as far as I know. They've mainly been working lately on a movie project, a film project, but I know they're going to be starting to work on another album soon.
Oh, really? That's great. And then, so because they can't tour and because of COVID, is there any, I guess that's the only alternative, right? Is just to continue to create new music, or
Yeah.
Is there any way, so there's no plans for touring or any sort of live performances?
Well, the only thing that is being talked about, the God in Three Persons performance at the Museum of Modern Art, it did extremely well, and they really want to be able to go further with that. So what's being talked about is a performance there is a brand new theater. Are you familiar with San Francisco very much?
Yeah, we live in Alameda. Grew up here.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I wasn't sure where you were. Okay. Well, then, there's a brand new theater on the Presidio.
Yeah.
And this was actually built as a movie theater back in the 20s and 30s, I think. And it had fallen into disrepair. And one of the Levi's gazillionaires came along and completely restored it to the tune of $40 million.
Oh, boy.
And it is a spectacular performance venue at this point, like 650 seats. And so, once again, falling into the sometimes you get lucky category, the guy who is the executive director of that, a guy named Bob Martin, he was the director of the Cowell Theater when the QB shows played there in 89 and 90. And so the residents were rehearsing God in Three Persons at the Lab in San Francisco. And he came to the rehearsals and loved it, completely loved it. So we're trying to figure out how to get the residents at the Presidio Theater on Halloween. But there are major obstacles in the way of a plague. So what's being talked about is the possibility of a pay-per-view internet broadcast. If, in other words, if it may have to be a situation where there could be a small live audience there, but with social distancing, you know, they can't really be sell the number of tickets that there would be demand for. So if that happens, then once again, there's a good possibility that there will be a pay-per-view broadcast of it.
Gosh, I hope so. That would be amazing. I would love to check it out live in person too. Well, you know, it's been about an hour. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there anything that you want to leave us with? Any final parting thoughts?
Well, you know, the reason why the residents started out doing this was because it looked like it would be fun. And it hasn't always been fun, but at this point, they would tell you that they're still having fun. And to have been doing it for almost 50 years and still be able to say that, you know, I think maybe that's their greatest accomplishment.
I agree. I think that's, you know, I just love it. The fact that they're artists and musicians and they've made a living doing this and they haven't chased the spotlight. I've lived my entire life just idolizing you guys. And I think you've inspired just generations of people and other musicians. You know, you've had a major impact. So I just really appreciate you and what you've done and taking the time to talk to us and just all the art you've produced. It's just wonderful. I'm so happy.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, it's always nice to hear those things, Eric. Absolutely.
Well, Homer, I really appreciate it, man. Well, be back in touch with you or with the label. Let you know when the interview is out, and you know, if you ever need help putting stuff together, I'm just across the bay.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Homer, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Bodhi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Homer.
You just made his world, man. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
Have a great night.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.